Let me tell you something about silence that most people never notice anymore. We live in an age where every thought, every coffee cup, every fleeting emotion finds its way onto a screen. Birthdays are broadcast, love is performed, even heartbreak is filtered into something digestible, and still there are people who stay almost invisible. They scroll, they watch, they understand everything that's happening, yet they rarely post a thing. You might know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. Now I want to hear from you. Why do some people scroll through life silently, never sharing, yet seem to know more about you than you do yourself? Tell me what you think in the comments. For a long time, I used to think they were just shy, disconnected, or maybe too busy. But the more I studied human behavior, the more I realized something deeper was happening. Something almost spiritual. Because their silence, in a world that rewards noise, is not just absence, it's presence. It's not about being unseen. It's about refusing to lose yourself in the performance of being seen. Carl Jung would have understood these people completely. He believed that in the modern world, the greatest danger is not external chaos, but internal fragmentation. That subtle split between who we truly are and who we present to others. He called it the conflict between the self and the persona. The persona is the mask we wear, the polished image built to please, to belong, to be admired. And on social media, that mask has become our second skin. Every post, every caption, every highlight reel is part of the performance. We curate our lives into narratives that say, I'm okay, I'm relevant, I matter. But according to Jung, the moment we start living through that mask too much, we begin to lose touch with our inner world. Our emotions become rehearsed. Our self-worth starts depending on feedback. We confuse being noticed with being known. And that's when something inside us begins to fracture quietly, invisibly. So what about the people who step back? The ones who don't post, who quietly disappear from the digital spotlight? Jung would say they are not withdrawing, they are individuating. They are doing the hardest, most sacred psychological work there is, the process of returning to the self. You see, individuation is not about becoming special. It's about becoming whole. It's about stripping away every false image we've built, every role we've played for validation, until what's left is raw and real. And that's what silence gives us. The space to meet ourselves again. For many people, posting online isn't just communication, it's survival. It's proof they exist. But those who fall quiet have started to sense the illusion. They've seen how identity can become a brand, how authenticity can be packaged, how easy it is to confuse the reflection for the reality. And they've chosen to step back, not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They've realized something most of us forget. The more you externalize your life, the less you actually live it. When you share a moment instantly, it stops belonging fully to you. It becomes public property, open to judgment, distortion, comparison. Jung would call this the loss of symbolic depth. Experiences lose their sacredness when they are exposed too soon. They stop being lived and start being displayed. And so, silence becomes a kind of rebellion. In a world addicted to performance, not posting is an act of psychological independence. It's saying, I will not be reduced to an image. There's a beautiful paradox here. People who rarely post are often the ones who feel the world most deeply. They're the ones who notice the shift in light through the window, who sense the quiet tension in someone's eyes, who hear what's not being said. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's sensitivity, it's depth. Jung often said that what you resist controls you. When we chase validation, we become controlled by it. Every like becomes a mirror reflecting who we should be. And without realizing it, we start editing ourselves to fit the mirror instead of looking beyond it. But those who step back from that system, who resist the dopamine loop of attention and approval, they begin to reclaim their inner authority. They no longer ask the crowd for permission to feel real. When Jung wrote about the collective unconscious, he was describing the shared myths, symbols, and desires that unite humanity. Social media, in a way, has become a distorted version of that collective field, a modern dreamscape where everyone projects their ideal image. It's hypnotic, it's powerful, and it's dangerous when we mistake it for truth. People who don't post have woken up from that dream. They've seen the machinery of performance, and they've chosen authenticity over applause. They've realized that to protect your soul in this age, you sometimes have to disappear a little. But silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's born out of exhaustion, the kind Jung called psychic fatigue. It happens when your outer life expands faster than your inner life can sustain. You start to feel hollow. You scroll through perfection after perfection and sense something quietly breaking inside. That painful awareness that you're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. So you step away. Not out of arrogance, not out of bitterness, but because you can't keep performing joy while feeling empty. And in that withdrawal, you start to rediscover something that can't be replicated online. Stillness, presence, the slow return of meaning. Jung believed that healing doesn't happen through constant expression. It happens through integration, meaning you must sit with your emotions long enough for them to reveal their truth. You can't post your way through transformation, you have to live it privately. Those who don't post often sense this intuitively. They protect their sacred moments, the tears, the laughter, the realizations, because they know that once those moments are shared, they lose their intimacy. They become diluted. There's something profoundly Jungian about the idea of psychological ownership, the sense that certain experiences belong only to you and must remain untouched by the gaze of others to keep their power. The modern mind struggles with this. It's been trained to share everything. But the soul knows the value of mystery. It thrives in the unseen. When you stop performing, something begins to shift. You stop thinking in captions and start feeling in silence. You notice time again, how it stretches, how it breathes. You begin to see colors more vividly, conversations more deeply. You're no longer living as content. You're living as consciousness. And that's what Jung was always trying to teach, that consciousness itself is sacred. To become aware of yourself, not as a projection or a persona, but as a whole, contradictory, living being, that's the highest form of psychological freedom. But here's the irony. When someone stops posting, the world often misunderstands them. People assume they've become distant, antisocial, detached. Yet in truth, they might be more connected than ever. Not digitally, but spiritually. They've shifted from seeking visibility to seeking reality. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Those who stay silent online are living that privilege quietly. They're not building a brand, they're building a self. And yes, it's not always easy. There are days when silence feels like invisibility, when you wonder if you're being left behind. But then something small reminds you. A deep conversation, a laugh that wasn't recorded, a sunrise no one else saw, and you realize that you're not behind. You're finally here. Silence teaches you that worth doesn't come from witnesses. It comes from awareness. People who don't post aren't rejecting connection. They're redefining it. They're tired of superficial intimacy, of hearts that disappear after 24 hours. They crave the kind of closeness that can't be screenshotted, the kind that lingers long after the screen goes dark. In Jung's language, they are listening to the voice of the self, that quiet inner presence that doesn't need validation, doesn't crave applause, and doesn't fear invisibility. The self is whole, timeless, untouched by the shifting masks of society. And the moment you align with it, the noise fades. That's the paradox of this era. We've confused visibility with value. We believe that to exist we must be seen. But Jung would remind us that the most powerful forces in life are invisible. Love, intuition, transformation. They happen in silence, in solitude, in the dark corners of the psyche where no camera can reach. And maybe that's why some people go quiet. They're not escaping life. They're descending into it. They're walking into the depths of their own unconscious, where the real work happens. Jung believed that every person must eventually face their shadow, the hidden parts of the self that we deny or repress. Social media makes this almost impossible. It turns life into a stage, and stages have no room for shadows. Everything has to look good, sound right, fit the narrative. But when you step off the stage, when you stop performing, your shadow finally catches up to you. It whispers truths you've ignored. It shows you where you've been pretending. That confrontation can be painful, but it's also the doorway to wholeness. And those who've stopped posting, who've chosen silence over spectacle, are often walking through that door without even realizing it. They are integrating. They are becoming real. I think that's why they see the world differently. The longer you stay off the digital stage, the more you feel time returning to its natural rhythm. Days stop being measured in posts. You stop chasing moments and start inhabiting them. You laugh without needing proof. You cry without needing witnesses. You live quietly but fully. And eventually, something beautiful happens. You begin to sense yourself again. The real you, beneath the filters, beneath the roles. Not the one who's liked, but the one who feels. That rediscovery is not just psychological, it's spiritual. It's what Jung meant when he spoke of the reconciliation of opposites. The moment when the outer and inner world finally meet, and you no longer feel split between the life you show and the life you live. When you reach that point, silence is no longer isolation. It's integration. It's not that you disappear. It's that you finally stop fragmenting yourself for attention. So maybe, in the end, people who don't post aren't rejecting connection. They're embodying a higher one. They remind us that not everything meaningful needs to be shared. Not every truth needs to be witnessed. Some things are meant to stay private, not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred. And maybe that's the quiet revolution Jung foresaw, a return to authenticity in an age of artifice, a shift from performing identity to discovering it. Because being unseen doesn't mean being unimportant, being quiet doesn't mean being empty, and not posting doesn't mean not living. It might actually mean you're finally awake, living your life not as content, but as consciousness itself. If this video made you stop and think, take a second to like it. It helps more people find it. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden sides of the human mind, subscribe and share this with someone who might need a quiet reminder of who they are beneath all the noise.